I'm here with Coffin of Nighthämmer to talk about Land of Fear, their latest record. How's things going with you?
Pretty decent, really good. I have no complaints, so that means a-okay.
A-okay. A-okay is good with me, man. I'll take it. I'll take it. So let's talk about this album. How long? Because this is your debut album. So how long have you guys been working on this debut record?
I There's a Elvis Costello song called "I Write the Book Every Day," and "Land of Fear" is definitely a culmination of like years of kind of just riff banking. But realistically, the three of us have only been together for a year. Um, and so I came up with Nighthämmer, the songs and everything like that for the first record, over the course of, a few years from probably like 2017 through to the pandemic. And then I met the drummer. We got together, started rehearsing the songs. And then maybe 2 months before we went into the studio at Earhammer, Keenan came on. He kind of came in and played some stuff a little bit here and there. And then he like fully committed to just, be a full part of Nighthämmer.
So from the track that you had laid out, was there any changes? Did you change a lot, or everything stayed very close to home?
No, I mean, I'm a miserable person when it comes to writing anything. My the way that I do it, my sort of like what's the protocol or whatever is that like everything is always changeable at a moment's notice if I get a better idea. So like the title track is like a kind of a two-parter. It's Land of Fear, reprise. Between that, they were ultimately totally different almost from their inception to what happened. So yeah.
Oh, at what point in time do you say, okay, enough is enough, this is finished?
Usually I have to exhaust myself, and then it's done. Then I go, yeah. It's what is it? I mean, I'm not claiming that this is great art. However, it's takes a lot out of me. But great art is never finished. It's just abandoned.
Wow, I've never heard that before. You
Oh
better copyright that shit because otherwise somebody's going to use it.
no, I didn't say it. It was probably like Picasso or something.
See, but now you ruined the whole aura of you being the great creative mind that put the sentence together.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I was there to remember it and use it, so I guess I can
Isn't
get some
possession
credit.
2/3 of owning something? Isn't there a law like that? Whatever.
9/10 possession is 9/10 of the law.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, exactly. So like you saying it, it's kind of like possessing it. So that there you go, it's yours.
certainly. I embrace it for sure.
Do you see as your biggest influences when it comes to the sound of Nighthämmer?
Man, it's really straightforward in terms of the influences, and they're only there kind of as a like a spiritual guidance. There's a little bit of a sound that's involved, but I think a lot of the sound of the black metal artists that I'm inspired by, like they come from the inside out. It's guys like hearing a sound and then doing it, like trying to recreate it as opposed to like following some sort of example. But yeah, on its face, I mean, Immortal's huge. Like there's a riff in Pelt of the Wolf that it's like I just was refer to it as the Immortal riff. Um, like the big ones, Destroyer 666, later Gorgoroth, Dark Throne, Satanic Warmaster. I could go much more obscure, but it doesn't mean anything. It's really like a Scandinavian led, mid 90s to late 90s sort of influence. It's the stuff I really love.
When you look at these influences, you the way you describe them, to me, it sounds that it's more about a state of mind or almost uh, from a personality standpoint, not just okay, their riff sounds like this, and I like that sound, so I'm going to kind of like create my own sound, but that it kind of imitates that sound. I think you're. It sounds to me like you're going a lot deeper than that. It's more about the aura, if you, for lack of a
Yeah.
better word.
I mean, to spiritually be influenced is obviously like a real influence. To mimic is another sort of like it's homage. There's a lot of bands that exist now, and especially after the pandemic, like these younger guys that it's not a slight, but a lot of bands that occur, especially in death metal, they're tribute bands. They're bands that like are a very excellent study of the people who did amazing things before them. It's a great way to, I mean, it's a great thing to do. I mean, to sort of improvise or try to get your head around that stuff and then to be a student of it. It's almost a little academic. But yeah, like when it's more important to sort of try to totally reference the spirit of a thing. First, identify it for yourself so that hopefully that it's unique when it comes out, and then to kind of follow through on that. And it's a launching point, right? Like it's a guide. Any of those influences, they're things to bump up against and then to kind of like play with and find inspiration from that, and then trying to marry those different elements that kind of come into play. So yes, it's certainly I'm interested in a much more, I don't know, intellectually satisfying engagement with the material, man. I mean, it sounds like goofy as hell and a little trite, but yeah.
Oh, I like where you going with this. I heard once, I can't remember who the comedian was, and he was talking about metal bands and how much he hated when people tell him that, "Hey, I found this band, they sound just like Iron Maiden." And he's
Yeah.
like, "Well, if I wanted to listen to Iron Maiden, I would go listen to Iron Maiden. Why would I listen to somebody who sounds like Iron Maiden?"
It's true. It's I talk about this a lot because there's a lot of a lot of people that you're constantly recommending bands to people. You're constantly trying to share things with the community of believers in any sort of extreme music, simply because it's an isolating sort of like experience, and for the most part. Um, and it's important to kind of always be reminded that you're like, okay, the bar is set, you should be meeting the bar or going above it. The end. Anything else is fantastic. It's great, but probably should be perceived as a stepping stone in its own right. Not very valid in terms of the contribution, maybe. And that might sound harsh. And we're not the arbiters of culture, despite however many people want to think that, right? Culture is like the kind of the residue, what's left over. That defines the contribution. So yeah, I mean, toss your hat into the ring, but you got to kind of meet the bar, and then hopefully your ambition should be to exceed it in some way, shape, or form.
So outside of the influences, how do you see black metal? What does black metal mean to you?
To uncompromising hate and disdain for anything that is false.
Wow, I've never seen black metal defined that way.
Yeah.
Those are some strong words.
It's yeah, and obviously all ambiguous. I mean, they can mean false, can mean anything to anybody, and hatred is different for everybody, but that is what it is. Like, kind of boiled down for me, at least. The lessons that I've learned from the people that I sort of admire in terms of their output. It it's black metal. There was Lords of Chaos came out a few years ago, and people, it's returned to the mainstream again for like the fourth time sort of deal. And you have all these different people that kind of read into the philosophy as spoken, prior, and it's just this giant sort of mess anyway. But I think at its core, you know, it's very simple, and the through line is, yeah, uncompromising hatred for anything that's not genuine.
And with that in mind, when you look at where you live, it doesn't really scream black metal to me. So when you look at the geography of the US, is there a city that screams black metal?
Oh man, I'm the worst person to answer this, only because I'll say no immediately. Uh, simply because from my perspective, and there's tons of American black metal bands that I love, contemporary as well as historical, right? Like, and even from this area, there are a couple that are lesser known, but that are incredible. Uh, you know, Black metal is, in my opinion, synonymous with, like, obviously the cold and nature. We've got a lot of that in California, but there's, in terms of genuineness, uh, it's tough. I mean, it's a slim pickings. So it always kind of screams Scandinavia, anyways, into, like, Finland and stuff like that. So it kind of covers a European, in my opinion, like, black metal is always kind of a European sensibility until you get people that kind of exude it, and then from that point, it's not the city. It's again from kind of the inside out. It's like individuals in a particular area that I think are less influenced by their surroundings and more a fan of, you know, wanting
But but
their surroundings be a product of them.
but you could take, maybe not a city, but you could take your surroundings in terms of what culturally drives you as an individual and turn that into black metal, make that black metal.
Oh
For
yeah.
example, a band like Black Braid, I think they've done that really well in terms of taking something that it's very specific to them and then making that be what they perceive as black metal to be.
Certainly. You know, speaking of like the indigenous black metal, I find that title completely redundant only because black metal has always been sort of an indigenous thing. I mean, because it was European. I mean, church burnings is an excellent example of like, even though Varg is a complete idiot, it's indicative of it's an indigenous led thing where it's like you took my people's culture from us and pasted over it with, you know, this ridiculous theocratic, you know, philosophy. So it's an indigenous, it's a rebel song, right? All rock and roll is a rebel song, and rock and roll is the blueprint for all this stuff in general. So yeah, there are plenty of, like I said, yeah, there are plenty of bands that kind of do it and then they typify it. Like I prefer what Pan American Native Front and Maquahito in terms of the indigenous stuff. There's also a Zuzalzeku, like a Mexican indigenous band, like that's incredible, that they just, I guess they don't feel it's important to make records, but they play shows and they do a lot of like sexy gigs where they fly to them or whatnot. But they're aligned with like Nuclear War Now and those guys.
Oh,
They played the Nuclear War Now Fest like a year ago, though, in April. Like, yeah, what it would be a year from now. So yeah, I love that stuff, and it is important. And it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I wonder. I think that these people would probably do it wherever they were at, right?
yeah, yeah, I agree with you. And I want to get back to your record, but I just want to throw this one in there because I went to Norway this year for Inferno. And you know,
Awesome.
for a long period of time, you always associate black metal or any extreme metal genre for that matter as something very underground, not accepted by society. But the
Yeah.
way they view black metal now in Norway is a total marketing thing where they can attract tourism to their
Yeah.
country through.
Yeah.
So what they hated and what they ostracized, you know what I mean, is now
Yeah.
what they're using as a marketing ploy to bring
Yeah.
people in. It was mind blowing for me because that's not what I was expecting going in there. I was expecting it to
Yeah.
still be something very marginalized, and it's
Yeah.
not. It's completely embraced by everybody.
Man, this is a really long conversation. I'm gonna say a few things because I
Sure.
agree. I agree. I agree. It's very bizarre and paradoxical. It's intelligent, you know, for the people that want to make money for tourism because it's a legitimate, you know, offering from the country that like doesn't exist anywhere. Like you know, Dark Thrones from Oslo, like or Koboldt, like it's not from anywhere else. Like you're not going to get it anywhere else. So yeah, man. I mean, slap it on a billboard, get people out there, like because the fests. I mean, you know, the fests in Europe are insane. Like
Yeah,
and the attendance is incredible. Like it is. There are all these commercial elements of it, and like to something that's not supposed to be commercial. But I think at some point it's like the spirit, the meaning, the message, if there is one, like or the fun, right? That's ultimately super important. I don't know so much about community as much as it's just that naturally people are gravitating towards this thing. So yeah,
yeah.
you know,
To me, it was really mind blowing because you get there, the hotel, everything surrounding the festival is black metal 24/7, right? Like
yeah,
the people
yeah,
working at the hotel wearing black metal band T-shirts, like it's like
yeah,
full on engulfed in this black metal, society. For a
yeah,
lack of everywhere you go, you cannot escape it.
yeah,
The day after the festival is over, everything is back to normal. Like people are like they don't
yeah.
even look the same as they did the day before.
The
So
costume comes off. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
like
Yeah,
it's like the
yeah,
switch that gets turned off, and it's like, okay, we're back to normal now because
yeah,
we have regular customers to deal with, you know. So
yeah,
it was such a weird thing for me
yeah,
to adjust in terms of what the cult thought was for me in terms of black metal and the cult following that it has and the roots that it has in Norway, to see it now on completely taken over by mainstream. and have that ability to turn on the switch and turn off the switch. To me,
Yeah.
that was really hard to wrap my head around, being the first time that I was there and that I was witnessing it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like there's a weird arms race mentality to it all because, what Bathory was doing in the mid 80s was terrifying to people. Right. And then what the Scandinavian guys with Mayhem and all these things, what that later on that scared people. The desensitization of these materials or like where they fit in society. I mean, for example, like I can like take an album cover that's full of like blood and gore and knives and weaponry and stuff like that, and people screaming in agony. But I can go like right outside, well, not outside my door, but like down the street and just watch human beings melting into the fucking sidewalk. Like it's disgusting. So it's a twofold thing where there's a desensitization that happens for the material where like what was taboo, 30 years ago is obviously a piece of cake now. And that we're waiting for something to really like into the next wave of a complete insane, like unprecedented sort of like horror. But then also real life is catching up. Unfortunately, like I know.
It's
Yeah.
really hard for you to be shocked these days because like real life is so shocking that it's hard for
Yeah.
you to be shocked with anything. It's like you're so
Yeah.
desensitized to anything that these days you're just like, all right, I've seen that before, whatever.
Yeah, the metaphor and the reality are starting to like eclipse or overlap for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm alive, we're alive, we're dealing with it, so it'll be the way it's gonna be.
Going back to your record and to this Land of the Fear album, I mean, talk about Land of the Fear. I think everything we just said, there's a lot of fear spreading through this land. When you're putting this album together, is there a thought process for you in terms of, you know, creating what do you want the identity of your sound to be going forward, starting off right with the debut record?
Yeah. Um Straightforward, black metal, but that is hopefully perceived as ambitious into pushing boundaries in terms of genre, without being experimental, finding ways to mutilate and contort other styles of music into this excellent sort of genre platform. That is the ambition for me for the sound. Um, it has to maintain that, evil cult feeling while we're experimenting, while we're putting things together. That's the ambition. Straightforward.
And who did you work with on the mixing and production of this album?
The one and only Grammy Greg Wilkinson, who is the bassist for Autopsy now. He's responsible for Brain Oil. He's in Deathgrave. He's a Grammy award winning engineer for like Electric Messiah for High on Fire's record. He works with everybody from, Autopsy to Necrot is all of Necrot's records. If you're familiar with that band,
Mhm.
are at Earhammer. Greg's great. I Beyond my personal friendship with Greg, his sensibilities are extraordinarily unique. Every single record that he puts out, you can almost tell from the first minute you're like, this is a Greg record. He's got a drum sound that's I think the best. I think it's better than most engineers working right now. He's from the world. He lives the life. He walks it and he talks it, and he just continues the legacy of extreme music. So that's who we work with. That's who I like to work with. Yeah, he's a great guy and an incredibly talented engineer and recording artist.
Hey, it doesn't get more black metal than that.
Yeah, man. I don't know. That's the whole thing, is that we're fraught right now in a world that's like, trying to find some shock value in a lo-fi black metal continuously, mixed with like, a very high produced, Watain scenario, sort of, Uwata or whatever. So yeah, it's kind of strange. Black metal is certainly not what its forebears, I think, cared to intend. I don't think they cared to intend anything. But yeah, it's interesting. It feels wide open and fun. And we're definitely going to smash a Nighthämmer right into the center of what that is.
And with that idea that you have for the sound, when it comes to the lyrical content, how important for you it is for that lyrical content to be a pure representation of what the sound is?
Yeah, that's a good question. With Land of Fear, it's led by a small concept. It's led by a small, like, you know, quasi science fiction worldview, taking something to its logical endpoint and then exploiting that, blowing it up, you know, cutting it, seeing how it bleeds. That's kind of where the lyrical content has come from. And I will say that it isn't just an on the surface thing. It's not just a bunch of cool, weird, you know, anatomy dictionary terms thrown together or like painful poetry. I don't like the sound of the human voice, to be honest, and especially when it's in my own language. So it's a very difficult task. Anything that I do say or scream or belt out needs to be good by my standards. There's no sleeping there, and it's keeps me up at night whenever I have to do it, which we're doing it right now. We're about to go back in the studio in September. So
Oh, wow. My last question for you is about shows. So are you guys planning on doing some shows? Maybe try to get something together to move outside of California, playing somewhere else? What's in the works?
the record's coming out in like next week. We are proselytizing for it. We're putting it in front of as many people as we can. I think a supply and demand respect for shows is what it is. We have been asked to play shows and we turn them down. There's a very particular, we will be particular. There's an opinion about this that I have. And that is that there's a saturation that has occurred or is occurring. There's a lot of competition in terms of media and entertainment. The issue with that is not that competition is bad, is that like what you're competing against is complete dog shit. Movies in general, and this is an American thing. I can't speak for everybody else, but I mean, movies and television and music is everywhere. You are constantly berated with noise and sound and advertisements for it. And unfortunately, when you do engage with most media, it's complete vapid garbage that was conceived by a child or a child rapist in spirit, it seems. I don't want to get into like
Sometimes not in
mainstream.
spirit, sometimes like in flesh and blood, but okay, that's
Yeah, I mean, I find it very strange that like we're in this sort of like anti-pedophile era with people, and yet we're like listening to all these artists who are, one, either underage, two, right above age, three, have breathy childlike vocals, and that do, you know, sort of like infantile baby stuff in a sexy way. It's a weird dichotomy, man. It's fucking strange. I don't get it. And then, you know, to like kind of look for any of these things should be enriching. What we're talking about, what we're seeing, like you're going to Norway for shows, stuff like that. Any art and media, it needs to be enriching. Hopefully there's a human being at the core of it and not a committee or a spreadsheet. So, I mean, these things are completely the most important, and yet we're confronted with things that are just not worthwhile. And I think, at least in the Bay Area, it's a weird saturation. Happens all the time. I don't even have to look for shows. They find me to go see them, any entertainment, whatever. So I think the choice is to make it something interesting, to supply something that you cannot just get, that you can't see on Instagram, that you can't just go and find on YouTube, any of those things, right? Like it needs to be a time and a place, and it needs to be important. So that's the approach we have to like live exhibitions.
well, that's a very well detailed approach. And you seem to be a man set in your ways, so
Yeah.
I don't see that approach changing anytime soon. Dude, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. I really enjoyed this conversation. It's been very stimulating and of the brain, very stimulating of the brain.
Yeah.
I really digged it. I think this was such a great chat. So thank you very much for taking the time. I just want to remind everybody watching this, Nighthämmer, the record comes out June 28th. It's Land of Fear. I'll put the links in the description of this video so people can go check you guys out. Thank you very much for your time today.
Pedro, thanks, man. I appreciate it.